This is East Idaho Newsmakers with Nate Eaton.
Thanks for being with us today. We are talking with Governor Butch Otter. He has a few more days left in office. What are your thoughts? It's coming to a close.
Well, it is, and it's been quite a ride, Nate. I've enjoyed, obviously, the last 12 years as governor, but the 6 years I was in Congress, maybe I didn't enjoy that so much. Yeah. Things are a lot better when you're a majority of one. I can tell you that. You're kind of running the show, and we went through the best of times. We're in the best of times, and we went through the worst of times, and so.
Worst of times, would you say, being the recession?
Oh, no question about it. When we had to make drastic cuts in areas that the Constitution's pretty clear on, that we should be, like education, that we should be taken care of. But fortunately, the legislature and I got together, had good agreements, good partnership, and I'm convinced that's why we're leading the nation now in coming out of this, coming out of the recession in 11 and continuing to grow and prosper and be leading the nation in such things as the jobs we've created, the amount of people that have moved to Idaho or are moving to Idaho, the growth in personal income, the growth in capitalization per capita for the state. All those things portend not only that we're in great shape, but that we're going to be in better shape. Because that capital you invest today is probably valuable capital in the useful life of those buildings and that equipment. So that'll go on for a long time. The IRS says it's good for 30 years.
Well, and Idaho has a surplus. There's not a lot of states that can say they have a surplus.
That's right. Plus we have $500 million in the bank in savings. So if that next recession comes along, we're structurally sound, so we're not spending any money that's one-time money on ongoing requirements. So no state employees' wages are being paid by one-time money. That's when we say structurally sound our budget is. That's what we mean.
So what would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned as far as leadership is concerned, being governor?
Put the coalition together. You know, there's a lot of successes that I look back at over the last 12 years that were a result of us putting the coalition together, finding the stakeholders, get them involved, listen to their complaints, listen to their criticism in the beginning. And then if you have to modify your plan just a little bit, then modify the plan. Probably when I look back on it, the biggest failure was Props 1, 2, and 3 in the beginning of my second term. We had a great product for education, 5-year plan, all of that, but we had a terrible process. We didn't do a good job of getting the stakeholders involved early enough so that they understood what we were trying to do. And now we got the 5-year plan for education, so we're always looking down the road. Used to be we only planned education a year at a time. And we've got agencies like the people that are building a road. I can tell you, Nate, where they're going to be building a road 5 years from now, or a bridge 5 years from now. But we couldn't tell you what we were going to be doing in the classroom the next year.
Yeah. All right, so is there anything that you say, man, I just wish we could have accomplished this?
Yes.
What would that be?
A sufficient and permanent stream for maintenance on our infrastructure. And I'm talking primarily about highways and bridges. We've got a tremendous asset in $9–10 billion worth of probably 7,000–8,000 miles of state highways and 4,000 or 5,000 bridges in the state. And if we don't maintain them in good order, then that's going to hurt our economic viability. Because one of the reasons we have been so successful in diversifying our economy so that we're not so susceptible to any one industry running into trouble. We've been able to add the value to the trees we cut off of the forest, the harvests that we make off of the farm, or the precious metals that we dig out of the ground. And we've been able to add that value right here in Idaho. But there's only one way to get it out of the state, and that's on a truck or on rail. And most of it goes by truck. In fact, the only thing I can think of that goes out by plane is computer chips, which is very valuable commodity. But all the farm commodities either go by rail or they go by truck. And you got to have good highways in order to do that.
What advice have you given Brad Little?
Well, I haven't had to give him much, Nate, and I'll tell you why. It's because he's been at my side for 10 years. Yeah. When Jim Risch, who was my initial lieutenant governor and won the lieutenant governorship, his third term his second term as lieutenant governor, when I won my first term as governor. And then he won that Senate seat that had been opened up. So he quit after 2 years as lieutenant governor. He had to resign in order to go take the United States Senate seat. And then I got the opportunity to choose the lieutenant governor, and as provided by the Constitution. So I interviewed 29 people for that position. And Brad Little was my choice, and he's been at my side. He's been in every leadership meeting. And I can tell you, as a former lieutenant governor for 14 years, there were very few. The only time I was consistently invited to leadership meetings was when I had the tiebreaker, when I had 21 Republicans and 21 Democrats in the state Senate, and I was the president of the Senate.
And that was what, once every few years?
No, that was actually 1991 and 1992.
Oh, wow.
And for 2 years, there were 21 Republicans and 21 Democrats. And I voted more times in the first 2 weeks than all previous lieutenant governors put together had voted. Wow. And it was interesting because that was the centennial. 1990 was the centennial. And that's the first time in 100 years that had an equally divided Senate.
Wow.
So our founding fathers were pretty visionary about solving those kinds of problems so that we really didn't end up in a logger jam. But, I always vowed that when I became governor, I was going to treat my lieutenant governor, because there were times when I was lieutenant governor in 3 separate decades and 2 centuries, under 3 different governors, there were times that they wouldn't trust me with anything sharp. But there were some that were very good to me, especially economic development, international trade, those kinds of things that I'd been doing in the private sector, and I could bring them into the public sector. So
he's prepared, he's ready.
Yeah, there's no question about it. In fact, myself included, I would tell you, I don't know of anybody that's been better prepared to be governor than Brad Little.
What are your views on national politics right now? Is it the ugliest you've ever seen?
It is the ugliest I've ever seen, and when I hope that sometime in the future, or in the future, as the kids who are studying political science in the classroom, the children, the education system, will tell the truth about this time, this vitriolic time, this lack of civility time, so that we'll never repeat it again. I hope it gets over. How it's going to get over, I can't tell you. But I was telling some folks today that earlier that the most civil time that I can remember when I was in Congress was the first 2 weeks after 9/11. When that crisis, that attack, brought us together like a family. And we protected each other and we cared for each other. And I can remember holding hands on the Capitol steps in the United States Capitol, singing "God Bless America." And that's the kind. You're not going to get that every day, Nate. But it's unfortunate that we can recognize our need to be good to each other and to be respectful of each other in times of crises. Why can't we do that in times of when we're just doing the people's business?
All right. So what will you miss?
Well, there's a lot of things. I don't know that I'm going to miss anything yet, but I suspect there'll be a lot of things I will miss. The engagement with the legislature and working out problems and partnerships that we have. Being able to take issues like education and building a 5-year plan so that we know what we're going to do in the classroom next year. Those kinds of things, working out problems.
What won't you miss?
Well, I won't miss some of the natural disasters that we've had in Idaho and the problems and the crises that it's brought to families, whether it's fires or flooding. I've seen them both sides. So the fire and ice equation in our lives, I've seen both sides. And there's some other things I won't miss. I won't miss having to make the decision about the death penalty. That's probably the thing that has bothered Miss Lori and I the most when we have to, when we know that's coming, and it starts, many times it starts 3 months before, because you have to get everything prepared. You have to make sure that every legal twist, every potential mistake that was made during the trial and sentencing has been covered. And so I can guarantee you that's the thing I won't miss.
And often aren't there appeals up until the last hour?
Up until the last hour, you bet. And I'm sitting by the phone, and we always have somebody out there at the execution site sitting by the phone. So in case anything comes up at the very last minute, but it's not an easy, that part is not an easy job. In fact, during the last campaign, when we had folks that were running in the primary and the general on both sides, I indicated to them that I would like to share that opportunity, at least that site, and what goes on there with them before they make the final decision about running for governor. Because, you think of the parades and you think of the state of the state messages that you're going to deliver. You think of the inaugural balls. You think of leading the state and what a great honor and privilege that is. And you don't think of that. Nobody ever warned me against that or explained that to me. And in fact, when I was serving under Phil Batt, he commuted one death sentence to life, and that was, as I recall, there was only one. I guess at the time that was the right thing for Phil to do. Yeah. But in my case, the 2 executions and there's 11 people on death row.
You mentioned getting that phone call from the prisoner or the attorneys or wherever.
Usually Supreme Court.
Supreme Court.
Or some court that says we're going to grant a stay.
What is the worst call you received as governor?
Oh, gosh.
Soldiers that have died?
Oh, yeah. 67.
67 Idaho soldiers.
Since 9/11. 67 Idaho soldiers have died. And
you go to the funerals?
Miss Lori and I, we go to, we've been to almost every funeral, I believe, and I apologize to anybody out there whose relation, son, father, or mother, sister, brother, that I may not have made. But I tried my best to make it to every one of them, being former military myself.
Wearing your Army pin, right?
I do, and I wear it with pride.
Can you recall the best phone call?
Yeah, you won the election.
There you go. Yeah, can't beat that.
No, usually the best phone calls have to do with the state of the state. We've got a surplus again this month. Our unemployment has gone down another 1%. So another 1% of Idaho's families, that's 8,000 people are back at work. Those kinds of things. The good news. those are much easier to deal with than the bad news.
So what are you and Miss Lori going to be doing now?
Well, we've still got a few days of consideration. I would tell you, we've both been richly blessed by, and flattered by offers that, would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? Would like you to serve on this board, or would like you to do that? And so we've been, as I said, we've been very flattered. But I got really good advice from a couple of former governors, one a Republican friend of mine from Mike Leavitt from Utah, and a Democrat, Dave, well, anyway, he was from Wyoming, Dave Friedenthal from, and when I was chairman of the Western Governors, there were several of us that were going to term out. I was going to term out too, so this was at the end of my second term. Why, I thought, what's life after governor? So I asked both of those gentlemen to come back to the Western Governors Conference and tell us, is there life after being governor? And they both advised us, which I thought was sound advice, good advice. Don't make any decision or firm commitment until you're out. That way you will never be conflicted. So let's just give you an example. All of a sudden my finance director calls, and I mean the Department of Finance director calls, and says, we got a problem in the banking business. And now there's been several banks that have asked me would I like to serve on their board. And I've said, just give me a one-page, I'm not going to make any decision until I'm out. Give me a one, or insurance companies. And say the insurance director calls and says, with an executive order, Governor, you can clear up this problem we have with banks. So I'm not going to be conflicted if that happens in the last few days of my administration. Do I sign this because it's going to hurt the industry? Do I sign this because it's going to be good for the industry? I can sign it with a clear heart. For those that have asked if I would consider, I said, just give me a one-page, what's your expectation of me? What do you expect of me? Yeah. And the First Lady's been doing the same thing. And like I said, I'm very flattered about all the offers we're getting.
You guys going to go on a trip or anything? You know, January 5th, head out of town?
I'm sure if you look at the First Lady over my shoulder, she's probably nodding. I can see her reflection in the window.
She's smiling. She's planning something.
We're going to go, it'll be in January, so we're going to probably go someplace where you can get the sand between your toes and it won't be ice cubed.
Island Park. No, just kidding.
That'd be ice cube.
Yeah, that would be. All right, last question. What do you want to be remembered for?
Well, I would say, you know, if in general, the greatest achievement was bringing us through the recession. Doing the right thing at the right time, creating the kind of partnership that we did with legislative leadership. And I told them at the time, I predicted at the time, that if we did the right thing in the tough time, that we would lead this nation out of the recession. And it doesn't take a Phi Beta Kappa to read the front page of the Wall Street Journal to see how many things we're leading in the growth of the state and population. A lot of people moving here. In the growth of capitalization in the state, the amount of capital that's being employed in terms of brick and mortar and equipment and creating job stations. Personal income, per capita personal income growth, the best in the nation. Our unemployment, we're at 2.7, which is at least at a considerably under, maybe like a full percentage point under the national average. And so we've got, you know, even at 2.7%, that means there's 23,500 people that are out of work. But I also want to be, so here I go, well, now do I choose this or do I choose this? But, you know, I think we've set the education on a course in Idaho, K through career, kindergarten all the way through getting a doctorate degree by the medical school that we created, the ICOM, the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine, the 2 community colleges. But getting a 5-year plan for K through 12 in the education system. I think that has brought a quietness to the arguments over the education budget every year. because we committed on that 5-year plan to $350 million. And you know, I tell people all the time I was in the legislature for 18 years, 14 years as president of the Senate, 4 years in the House of Representatives, in the state legislature. I participated in the arguments and the debates over education. Not enough, way too much. We're not demanding the right kind of response. We're not getting the right kind of goals that we had in mind, all of those things. And you know, during those same years, we didn't have those kind of battles over fish and game, because I could tell you where you could go catch a fish or shoot an elk in the next 5 years. I couldn't tell you what we were going to do in the classroom next year. And so creating, I think, a prototype and a model for the leadership in the legislature and the executive branch of government to always be 5 years ahead. Where are we going to be in 5 years? Here's what we're going to do next year. Where are we going to be in 5 years? And this next executive coming in and the superintendent of public instruction already have the last year of the 5-year Otter plan. So they already know what they're going to do next year. They can build on that horizon. Say, okay, how are we going to improve education in 5 years? So many times we get conflicted and we get tied up over trying to create an education system that we can't create in 1 year, but we can create it in 5 years. And the promise is in that planning.
Governor Otter, thank you. Thank you for your service. And congratulations, and enjoy retirement or whatever's next. Go somewhere warm with the sun.
I'm going to go open a TV station if it's this easy.
There you go.
So look out, Frank.
Thank you very much, Governor. Thank you for watching. Have a good week.